Welcome, and thank you for tuning in. You're listening to the Beyond 50 radio program. I'm your host, Daniel Davis. So here we are in economic down times, yet people are still out there putting business license registrations in because they want to see their dreams come true. So you might just be one of those people who are listening to the show today saying, you know, I did just that very thing. I'm going to open up a hot dog stand, and I'm going to watch all of my dreams come true. So you go out, you get the loan that you need, you get the hot dogs into the steamer, and the bun's nice and warm, and the ketchup and mustard is all aligned and just waiting for people to come up and buy a hot dog. So then a week goes by, then a month goes by, then 3 months go by, and you just don't see those dreams coming to the fruition of reality that you wanted. What is it you could do different that would actually create a magnetism for people to come and buy your special hot dogs when 5 other hot dog stands are within the same block? Joining us here on the Beyond 50 radio program today is someone who's going to provide those kind of answers for us. And we're going to be talking with her about her book, The Science of Spiritual Marketing, Initiation into Magnetism. And I think that's what we could all use. I'd like to welcome our guest today, author of The Science of Spiritual Marketing, Andrea Adler. And Andrea, thank you for joining us here on the Beyond 50 radio program today.
Hi, thank you for having me. I loved your opening, and I want to start by saying that I hope they at least have organic hot dogs to offer people.
Yeah, it's part of the green weenie movement.
A huge difference in magnetizing those people who may want the hot dog.
Exactly. Now, you know, it's funny because I was just recently watching a stand-up comedian back in the 90s is when he passed, Bill Hicks, and he was talking about, is anybody in here in marketing and advertising? Because if you are, just go kill yourselves. You know, and you think about what he said and how profound that is. He says, because none of these people have really done anything to improve society, but when you think about advertising and marketing, those are words that it's just like saying shark, for instance, to a lot of people. Why is that?
Well, it has acquired a very harsh reputation throughout the years, and it is actually why I started the book using that premise as the first chapter, which is the root chakra of PR. Why have those words acquired such a harsh reputation? And primarily, it's because of the abuse and manipulation that many people in advertising and public relations have instilled in the public, from bombarding us with too many images, too much information. We cannot even stand at, well, I hear at the urinals in men's bathrooms now you're getting advertising. Certainly at the gas pumps it's happening. I mean, this is the communication age, and so we are getting it everywhere, not to mention the Internet. So there really does need to be, and has needed to be, a new paradigm, which in the early 80s I realized quite significantly while working in Silicon Alley. There was Silicon Valley, Silicon Alley in New York. And I was working, you know, in many of the dot-com companies, watching all this money fly through the air, all these venture capitalists throwing their money to these young entrepreneurs who had just graduated college with college mentality, which is why so many of these dot-com companies failed, is because they really didn't understand how to connect the dots. And they had this procrastination mentality from college. This is just how they got through school, was they crammed for those tests at the last minute. Well, you cannot achieve business and do business well, and certainly do business in high integrity from that point of view. So I realized that nobody was connecting the dots, and I was looking around and going, oh my God, this is like a free-for-all here. And I stepped back, and I went, you know, I don't even know where this insight came from. That's why I truly believe I'm a channel for this information. I've never taken a marketing course in my life. I read very few marketing books. This is all very organic for me. And yet, when I had started businesses in the past and became very successful, it was because I had this sort of aerial view, this holistic point of view about how to connect those dots. And for me, it's the difference between, you know, allopathic and naturopathic medicine. You know, the naturopath is looking at the whole body. and the allopath is just looking at the ear. So I really believe there needs to be this approach that integrates the physical, the mental, the emotional, the psychic, and creating integrity and boundaries around that. You know, so we have come from a past of, spiritual, moral, and emotional retardation in many respects.
Right.
And nobody was looking at the blind spots. I was just reading an article, actually, on why GM failed, for instance. And it's the same reason that the hotels in the Catskills failed when I lived in upstate New York. It's that they refused to look at the future and deal with the future. Now, for the Catskill Hotel, it was clearly people were not going to the Catskills anymore for those very fatty foods, primarily from a Jewish tradition.
Mm-hmm.
They wanted spas. They wanted to get healthy. They wanted to run and jog and be in nature, and they didn't want to look at it. So one by one, those hotels went into bankruptcy. In the same way, GM knew. How could they not know that cars had to change, that they had to reduce the mileage, that they had to totally transform the way cars were made, whether they went toward electric cars or... So both of these industries, and there are many, many more examples, you've got to have a vision of the future.
You know, Andrea, when you bring up the GM situation, it reminds me of someone who was telling me about American Motors, and I think it was Chrysler. I really don't remember which of the big three that it was, that they were actually manufacturing cars and selling cars in Britain and England that were getting fantastic gas mileage. But yet, here in the United States, nobody was seeing these things until people started crying foul due to the rising gas prices.
Well,
but he says in Europe they've been enjoying that for years from American cars, and I'm thinking, okay, so what's the story here?
Well, the electric car got killed.
Right, right.
I mean, the gas companies were flipping out that they would not be using, their product anymore. And also Edward Demings, who pretty much revolutionized the whole Japanese economy, approached these three car companies way before he went to Japan, and nobody was listening. So he went to Japan, and Toyota listened, and Honda listened, and all those companies are thriving now because they listened. So, this is only a part of why those words have such a stigma, and why, honest to God, I think I've been planted on this earth to change that paradigm, because this can be a very magical, mysterious, wonderful process, and why I went so deep in meditation with this concept, why it is and needs to be a spiritual, holistic approach to our business, to marketing our business, to sharing the information in many, many ways, to educate the population that we want to reach from a visceral, somatic response. So how do we do that? Well, that was a meditation. I was like a scientist, really wanting to find out what is at the core of an outreach, a successful outreach that is sustainable. Well, and what I came up with was this need for an initiation.
Mm-hmm.
And the initiation starts with Chapter 1, the root chakra. Why is it we exist in a society that doesn't want to look at the future and that doesn't want to dive inside first and ask, what is at the core of myself? What is my true gift that I have to offer? Because I believe we all have a gift. And how that gift surfaces and how we can disseminate that gift to the masses is a very different process for each one of us. Now, the process is the same.
Mm-hmm.
Getting to the gift is something I really believe I've been able to achieve and be able to midwife that information from people from their soul level.
Because I know when as you read through the science of spiritual marketing and getting back to public relations and marketing companies, come on in, spend your money with us, and we'll get you out there. Well, you also say in your book, but there's a way that you approach this realistically so it does become effective should you go that route. But sincerely what you're saying is for a person to really dig deep within themselves so the genuine message of how they're serving the world becomes so authentic that it's hard not to be successful.
You know, and these veterans coming back from the war, all these thousands and thousands of people who are out of work, both populations thinking they have to find a job instead of, and standing in line for hours for this one job that they really don't even want, but because they need to make an income, they're standing in line. This is a population I would love to reach. It's one of the reasons I'm, working on getting to Washington to propose this initiative. Because if these veterans could actually sit down and dive deep and find out what it is that they're passionate about and what their gifts are, they may not have to find that job that they don't like. They could actually become tremendously successful entrepreneurs.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe it's, in their childhood, they always loved working with hair. Well, whether it was a man or a woman, maybe that's the future for them, is to go to a school to learn about hair and how to cut it and style it, and something that they would be totally fulfilled doing. But they haven't been given the opportunity. Yes, there are these business incubators and these one-stops that exist and pre-exist in many cities throughout the U.S. But these incubators only deal with the people who have an idea and are sometimes accepted into that incubator. But what about the thousands of people who are clueless about what it is they want to do?
Mm-hmm.
That's the population I would like to reach.
I know you give some really fascinating stories about how, for instance, you were talking about the town of Salem, and people become familiar that this was a town that has a very dark past. Now go ahead and share what happened there and how that town changed itself just by accepting that was their past and there was no escaping it.
Well,
and this gives us an idea of how holistic PR versus traditional marketing and advertising approaches, how it's different.
It was a very powerful experience for me, taking my son when he was quite young to Salem, because we all know the history of Salem, Massachusetts, and the witches, and because I have dealt with the holistic therapeutic community for so many years and really appreciate their gifts, as esoteric as they may be. I just thought, let's take this little trip here and see what this town is about now. And I had no clue how they had transformed themselves. So we went, and I was just blown away at how they had embraced their past and not tried to negate what that past was about, but rather, they have exploited it in some respects, because it is now a tourist town. Mm-hmm. Where you go in and you experience and re-experience what happened during that time period and how these deaths occurred and how they killed, these women particularly who had these gifts. But the town, like the basketball team is now called the Witches, and they have little keychains, they have a gift shop with all these, witches on broomsticks, and they really took their past, once again, embraced it, and created a marketing phenomena that feeds their little city.
Mm-hmm.
And no one is embarrassed. I mean, there may be some embarrassment from the past, but they've turned it around. I was just blown away at the magnificence of what had occurred and how they're being represented currently.
Mm-hmm. It's interesting. Just not too long ago, I was reading a book called The Big Bang or something like that. It's making your message heard in a noisy world, and basically this was an advertising firm out of New York that created the Aflac duck. So they were pretty much embroiled in how they were so. It was always funny how, as they would talk about different campaigns they worked on, was the money that there's no way we could do a campaign for less than $360,000, and it was always about the money. And yet, when you take a look at holistic public relations and marketing, holistic PR, that is, you really see that each and every one of us, once we can tap into that creative flow of who we are, that we can be as effective, if not more effective, than somebody else trying to broadcast our message about our service or product, whatever it may be. So let's talk about the Tao of marketing.
I started this business literally on a shoestring because the people that I wanted to work with, primarily at the beginning, were the holistic therapeutic community who had no money, were very challenged by the concept of marketing, and here I was trying to earn a living supporting them. It was very challenging, but it taught me how to be extremely creative.
Mm-hmm.
I had no money for advertising, so it really forces you to get very creative about how I'm going to help this client disseminate the information, because he's on a tight string as well. So learning that from the get-go has really helped me to help other people who are also struggling and challenged by certainly financially, but the word-of-mouth phenomena is still the best way to disseminate any kind of information. But how do we set it up in a way that word-of-mouth spreads? And it's a process. Mm-hmm. And one of the processes is understanding the power of our own story. What is the power and significance of this gift that we want to disseminate? And more importantly, what is the story other people are sharing about our gifts, our products, our services? So those are very important questions to ask. Besides the fact, and it's a vision quest that I take people on when I do a consultation or present a workshop. And this is, for me, the essence of this work. And we may have an intellectual observation of what we think our businesses should be like, could be like, but it goes way deeper than that. And so part of this process and this vision quest helps you to dive deep to surface that wisdom, and then you have a stronger sense of how this business can look 5 years from now, 3 years from now, 1 year from now. And then I help people, once that vision has surfaced, create, and which is Oz, O-Z, then I help people create the yellow brick road that gets them to that Oz, which gives them an aerial view of exactly how they can move forward, strategically, prioritizing step 1, step 2, step 3, for the next 5 years. I love it when people call me back after 5 years and go, okay, Andrea, we did the consultation, I've done the business, I'm at the 5-year mark, I need to come back. And that's how far people can go with 1 2-hour consultation.
5 years, that's pretty incredible.
Pretty incredible.
Let me ask you this in your experience, because typically you hear the cliche, if you will, that most businesses fail within 1 to 5 years. Does that really need to be necessary from the way that you approach a business?
My experience is that when people seriously move through this process, there's no way they can fail. There's absolutely no way they can fail. If they're true to their vision and they have followed the strategy and the mind map, that yellow brick road, there's no way they can fail.
Mm-hmm. So now we have an idea how holistic PR is different from traditional means. Talk about how you've worked with certain people, kind of share stories where maybe the lights can go on for a listening audience.
Oh my God, there's so many stories in the Naked City.
Yes, you can always talk about the one with your son and his teeth.
Well, let's talk about my son, because he is a really wonderful example. And because I suppose it's so close to home, Brian had a gift early on when he was 5 years old, actually. He took to this Indian drum, the duck to water, and he was 5 years old. And he started playing this instrument called the mridang, which is an Eastern Indian drum. And I saw that he had a talent and a gift. And I bought the drum, and he started taking lessons, and then he went from that drum to an electronic drum set, and he would practice, up to 4 hours a day. And it came time for him and he would receive awards in high school, and he got into college, into New England Conservatory of Music on a full scholarship. And when he was about to leave college, I asked him the question. I said, so, do you want to play music only? Or do you want to work at Banana Republic or someplace else part-time and do music on the side? He says, just music. I said, then before you leave college, you may want to set that up for yourself. And he started sending out resumes to music schools, and then he went to New York and he posted up flyers to teach classes for kids. And by the time he left college, he had 30 students, and he was enrolled at 2 or 3 different music schools teaching classes. So he was totally set up to go from college in Boston to New York, get an apartment, get a car in one day, and he had 30 students that paid for everything.
Wow.
Now he is down to 1 day a week teaching, and he is gigging all over New York and Boston, and performed at the Seattle Jazz Festival and headlined, went to Amsterdam. He's a very successful composer and jazz drummer. So he had the vision, and he worked very, very hard. Now, let's just take another example. A woman who took a workshop of mine 5 or 6 years ago in Oakland, California, started out, her and her partner were in the midst of writing a book on Reiki and how Reiki and this kind of healing touch affected animals, primarily horses. They took the workshop, they had a consultation, and then what happened was they severed their relationship. It was a very challenging time. But because they understood the principles of spiritual marketing and how they needed at that point in time to go their own way, they each did. And one of them has now the most successful website and teleclasses and courses offered to teach Reiki to horses, for horses.
Or horses, wow.
AnimalReikiSource.com.
Mm-hmm.
Kathleen Prasad took everything, every single piece of information that I offered, and did each step. Even during a very challenging time, she was able to move through that time because the vision of her future was so strong for her that she was able to move through the biggest obstacle in her life, she said to me. So that's one student I'm very, very proud of. And I hear from people all the time now who have gone the 5 years, done that 5-year vision, are now calling back. And now I'm fortunate enough to now speak at large conferences so that I'm dealing with a body of people affiliated with an organization that can move the organization forward by understanding these principles.
I know earlier in the program I was talking about somebody opening up a hot dog stand, and there's actually a direct relationship with someone that we have who started a mobile Thai cuisine type cart. And in Portland, Oregon, and most cities, you actually see these kinds of businesses in downtown. It's a small little trailer, and somebody's offering a type of food. And it was interesting that, at first, a lot of people, as they start a business, envision that it should immediately replace the income they were earning for their job and their lifestyle. And in fact, they find themselves working longer and harder and getting a lot less. And I was noticing, I said, well, how do you get the word out about, who you are and what you do? Because they work a lot of the sort of like farmers markets, if you will, but that's very seasonal. And I said, you got to plant the seeds with these vendors here, just simply offer them something so they get a taste for it. The other thing, too, is I noticed it said world's greatest egg rolls. Well, everybody thinks they've got the world's greatest something. I've offered, why don't you take a look at maybe the most unique egg roll you've ever had? Because you talk about in your book, The Science of Spiritual Marketing, is getting into how people think. And you give an interesting story how you started a moving company to help people move in downtown Manhattan. Go ahead and describe that.
Well, it was a business called Professional Organizers. It's before anybody was doing any kind of organizing or organizing closets or, I was always sort of ahead of the game with ideas. And so I put this one ad in New York Magazine called Professional Organizers. We'll help organize closets, desks, whatever. I didn't even put moves down. And then out of the blue, somebody called me and said, could you help organize a move? And I said, of course. I mean, I had moving down to a science because I moved so often myself. So I went, this is a whole business right here, especially in Manhattan, because people, there's a lot of movement, but people who are in Manhattan usually stay in their abode for many years because it's rent controlled. So they accumulate a lot of stuff. And when it comes time to moving, they get catatonic. So I thought, how do I offset the fear and the uncomfortableness about moving? So I thought I'd counter that by saying moving can become an enjoyable event. It's like, whoa. That's never a thought I really had. So I created a brochure, and I placed this ad back into the New York Magazine, and literally, with one ad, had 4 years of business. Because people were catatonic when it came time to moving. And so I started then being asked to talk about this at various networking groups, like, well, how do we move? Actually I set up this business coordinating, supervising, and expediting moves in and out of Manhattan. And, you had to be fairly well off to afford this service because it was very entailed. I mean, I would be hired to, people would move out of, they would go on vacation. And they'd say, okay, Andrea, you handle everything. We'll come back in a month into our new home. So I would hire out the carpet cleaners, the window washers. I would pay somebody, well, actually I wouldn't pay them. They would come in and purchase these clients' antiques, just, bring cash. And it was also the process of letting go. So many times I would work with these clients to just help them let go of clothes they didn't need to take to the next place if they weren't using them anymore. And that's part of just letting go of karma. We accumulate stuff. We become pat racks because we're afraid to let go, which can be very detrimental to our growth. So a lot of the time was spent just helping people let go of stuff. Now, how I promoted and marketed this, first of all, the only time I spent money on an ad was on this one ad that I placed in New York Magazine. The rest of the promotion and advertising came from the New York Times that did an article about me and this business, and Moving Magazine, who thought this was such a cool idea. And what I would never do was take money from these moving companies if I recommended them. Because if anything happened, I did not want to be responsible. So I would call Beacons and United, and I would have my clients interview the moving companies, and they would select the ones they wanted to work with. And then they would literally leave town, and I would work with all the people that needed to be there. And they would come back, and their dogs would be walked, flowers were on the table, everything was set up, and I was exhausted.
But in a very happy way, I'm sure, than going to the job that you can't stand, that's for sure.
No, it was a lot of fun. I burnt up a lot of moving karma myself, actually. And then when I was really exhausted, because I was sometimes doing 5 moves a month, I sat down, I wrote a manual, how to do this business, and I sold it. I actually sold the business twice, which is another interesting story, because the lawyer that drew up the contract said, why don't you put in a clause that if the people you sell this business to do not do the business in 10 years, the business comes back to you. I said, well, that's never going to happen. He goes, it's not costing you any more money to put in this clause. I said, okay. So the people that bought this business moved to Washington, and 10 years go by, and I'm going, all of a sudden it just dawned on me, it's 10 years. I wonder how they're doing. So I called them. They said, we never did the business. My wife had a baby, and then we had another baby, and then I decided to go into real estate, and we just never did the business. And I said, well, this is amazing because, there's that clause. He goes, I know. It's back to you now. You can sell it again. So I had the business again, and I sold it.
Nothing like making money twice on one business.
It was quite amazing. It was
I think
very
what's
good
marvelous, too, about the science of spiritual marketing is when I think of the Rich Dad, Poor Dad series, Robert Kiyosaki, who we've also had on our program, is he says, money is an idea, and then when you bring in your book, it's to take whatever that idea is and go deep enough with it so that you not only connect with the world with your servitude, but that you also create the magnetism that creates a success, because when you're successful on that level, you just want to do more of it. You find yourself truly passionate where you can't sleep at night because you're so excited about what you're about to do for the next day. Do you have a website people can go and visit and find out more about how they can get into the science of spiritual marketing? Because I know that you do teleclasses and seminars, and you do a lot of lecturing and the like, and CDs. Give people the website where they can find out more about that.
Sure. It's www.holistic, with an H, holisticpr.com. And I would like to say that a new paradigm has come into my consciousness that really has been very interesting, and I've been using it lately, and it has changed so many things about my own life that I'd like to share.
Okay.
And that is that we think, and in the past we have been sort of convinced that if we say certain things, that it will come to pass. And that's not necessarily true. You know, like, I know that I want to be rich and famous, or I want a house in Malibu, or, you know, you claim these statements. And part of it is, you know, this whole The Secret kind of thing, which I really don't buy into, because I believe there's effort and grace, and we have to make room for God's grace.
Mm-hmm.
We make the effort, and then we leave room for grace. It's like the effort, and then we meditate, clear our heads, you know, and then listen to Spirit. So this new paradigm that I've been introduced to through these shamans, interestingly enough, is that this quantum field that we are now entering in a very fast pace is giving us the opportunity to ask the question instead of naming or trying to solidify what we want. So let me give you an example. I know that I would like to do more speaking engagements with large conferences, because I know there's the need to work with a body of people rather than just individuals, which I also love to do. But everything is speeding up, and I want to reach more audiences to interest them and share with them this initiation process. So this new paradigm is to ask the question and leave it to the universe to answer. So the question is now, wouldn't it be wonderful to speak in front of larger audiences all over the world? What would that be like? Instead of, I want to do this.
Right.
And so I've been thinking about this question, giving it to the quantum field, offering it to the quantum field, and just meditating. And lo and behold, this morning, I received two separate invitations to speak and be a keynote speaker at two different organizations, both in North Carolina. Pretty amazing.
Absolutely. I like that approach too, versus I want to be a millionaire, I want to win the lottery. You know, basically what you're saying is you'd like life to get easier. The truth about that is it does as you're achieving and pursuing what your dreams are in a way that serves people.
That's not even my intention, though, is to make it easier. It's just that this is the next stage of evolution of my work, is to reach a larger body of people. So the question is, how would that feel? What would that be like? Well, it would be wonderful, because that is the next step for me in my work. So what we really have to key into is, what is the gift that we have to offer? And how can it be disseminated to the audience that we want to attract? And what is the next step for us? Now, for me, I've spent 35 years doing this. I have a website. Some people don't even have a website. And we all need a presence on the web. And that presence has to energetically reach, magnetize those people that we want to attract and work with. Not everybody is interested in holistic marketing. And I know that. And I don't care. I just want the people who I can support to be attracted to what I have to offer. And that comes across in the colors, in the look, in the feel, and in the text. And I tell you, the power of our words are so important. every word we speak, every word we have on our website, it has to have meaning and power. And many people just go on and on and on. They think they have all the space in the world, and they just want to share everything with everybody, and that doesn't work.
Yeah, I've seen websites like that too.
Or they want to draw their attention by having flash or so many ads that they want to bring on. I mean, it's an art and a science. Even our card is a representation of who we are. The colors, the look, the feel. These are extensions of who we are. I remember when I was working in the early 80s in Silicon Alley, and I would say to these CEOs who wanted to hire me, I would say, I'm 5 years old. Tell me what your company is about. Because they'd be so in their heads and so technical about their businesses that I wouldn't get it. And if I didn't get it, how was I going to help them with their marketing materials to share with the mainstream America about what their website is about?
Mm-hmm.
And many times I would have them change their names because the name of their business had nothing to do with their software company. And if that disconnect occurred, there's no way they would become as successful as they wanted to be. And I know people, one in particular, that spent $100,000 on a name that did not connect to his business. And I saw it from the beginning, and eventually he went bankrupt because he didn't hear me. And yet I have given people one idea that made them millions of dollars. So it's all about where are you? What information do you need to have at this point in your life and in your business? Are you questioning where you are and what business might be available for you? Are you at a place where you need to reinvent yourself and you want to do something completely different than what you've done in the past? Or do you want to take your business to the next level? This work can support all those audiences. It doesn't matter where you are. Even if you have no business, you can get clarity about what you might be able to do and what your gifts are.
You know, and the beauty about all this, too, even with our most recent newly elected president, is government always seems to every election cycle talk about how they're going to get new jobs. And for anybody who's been in business for themselves, they just say, well, I think I'll just go ahead and take care of that for myself.
Exactly.
And it's amazing, too, because
That's
you can make that possible.
That's why I want to reach Obama, because we don't need all these jobs. Let's see where the void is. Mm-hmm. Let's move into the void. I always ask myself, so what's needed? You know, where's the need? Mm-hmm. Where's the blind spot? You know, I saw clearly on, you know, especially after 9/11. I was in New York, and on 9/12 is when the whole world shifted. 9/11, we were all in shock. Mm-hmm. 9/12, the dust started to settle, and we go, holy smokes. Everything is changing. Life is no longer black and white. And that's when a local health, it was a healing center, brought out several massage tables and started working on the doctors and nurses and the firemen who were working 24/7. And I stood there and I said, oh my God. They were receiving shiatsu and reflexology and these esoteric healings they'd never experienced before, and they got off of those tables. They were mesmerized. And I went, oh, God has put me in the exact right place. And the message was, go home and write the book, because these holistic therapeutic practitioners needed to know how to really get their business in shape, because they were going to be used big time. Now, this was 9/12. You see where the holistic population is now. They've come a long way.
The book is The Science of Spiritual Marketing, Initiation into Magnetism, and our guest, Andrea Adler. Andrea, it's been a pleasure to have you on the program. There's a lot we could cover about this book. Unfortunately, we don't have all the time in the world, at least not at this moment. But
really
go ahead and give your website out again one more time.
Sure. www.holisticpr.com. And if anyone is interested in having a consultation or inviting this work into your global community, you can call me at 505-983-7777. Thank you so much. It's been a real pleasure. You're a wonderful interviewer, and I hope I didn't talk way too much.
Well, you got to get the information out there. Sometimes it's just better to listen.
Thanks so much.
You bet. Andrea Adler, thank you for joining us here on the Beyond 50 radio program.
Take care. Bye-bye.
You bet. There's your opportunity. Reach deep within yourself and find out what that special gift is for you to share with the world, and then put in motion how you can make it come to fruition so that you'll want to do more and more of it, and also create the ripple effects that inspire others as well. The book is The Science of Spiritual Marketing. Andrea Adler, our guest. I'm Daniel Davis. Thank you for tuning in. You've been listening to the Beyond 50 radio program. Visit us on our website at beyond50radio.com. Sign up for our free weekly e-newsletter. Also be sure to visit us at our blog. We archive all of our shows, and we have some great resources and information for you to enjoy and pass on to friends and family as well. Thank you again for tuning in. This is the Beyond 50 radio program. Remember, live your day past halfway.